And we're good.
Hey everybody, welcome to I'd Rather Be Motivated, episode 25. Today's episode, how to make comics, the I'd Rather Be Drawing way. So today, after we do the art check, what we're going to be getting into is, now that David and I have started to get a couple of comics under our belt, we're just going to kind of talk to you about our comic making process and hope that that can be helpful to you. I'm just talking process and tools and just kind of basic stuff to go from idea to a printed comic. So how are you doing today, David?
Oh man, I'm doing great. I'm pretty excited about tonight's episode. I thought it was a really cool idea, since we're both literally in the process of sort of making a comic. You've got your anthology thing and I've got Analog Missions, and this is not our first one anymore. It's kind of a fun, got a few under the belt kind of thing. We definitely sort of have a routine, and I thought it'd be fun to talk about it.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be great. And as always, we are going to start off at the top of the show with our art check with the 3 Ps: progress, problems, and plans. And sorry, I'm just sort of checking everything. Let me know in the chat if everything's sounding okay or not. Just want to make sure everything's coming through. But yeah, the 3 Ps, we didn't come up with that. We lifted that off the 48-hour art check, another art show that you guys should definitely go watch. Link will be below for that. David, when you're not here on I'd Rather Be Drawing's YouTube channel, where can we find you?
All right, yeah, when you're not here, you can find me at Art of Mr. Fleming on Instagram, and that's the best place to find me. I have a link in my bio to pretty much every other place you can find me as well. If you're a Facebook guy, you can find me at Mr. David Fleming, and then my store and VShop and all those things are also linked through both of those channels. So how about you, man?
Same thing. Instagram is where you'll find me the most, and I have a link tree as well where you can find all the other stuff. It's Mr. Green Draws, mr.greendraws. Once again, and then if you're Facebook, you find either of us at I'd Rather Be Drawing on Facebook or here on YouTube, as well as, of course, I'dRatherBeDrawing.com. So yeah, jumping into it, it's been a week. What kind of progress have you made, Mr. Fleming?
So man, it's one of those things again where I make enough progress that I'm like, I kind of forget where I was at the last time we talked. But I know I had just finished a digital piece that I was excited about. I had just finished my Yondu print, and I'm gonna be excited that once I finish these other 3 that I'm working on, I'll send that away to CapPrint, get that printed, and it'll probably be available at my next convention. I finished 2 more full pages of inking and a couple more pages of penciling on the comic. And I've just been kind of slowly posting those over on the Facebook and Instagram too. I'm at that point where I'm like ahead in my actual where I'm at than what people have seen. And that's kind of a really cool thing, because I don't want to share all of it necessarily. And so now that I'm kind of ahead, I can kind of decide exactly what I do want to kind of show the public and not show the public. So yeah, I mean, it feels really good to kind of found a really good flow. I made that comment on one of my posts that I felt like I wasn't being productive enough and maybe I needed to change my flow, and I did. And before, I was literally just doing like pencil all the way through to completion kind of thing, like pencil, ink, screen tone it, scan it to the computer, add my extra little bit of grays, and then put it in a file kind of thing. And that felt really good, but it was not getting me anywhere fast. And so I've kind of started a new flow where I kind of work simultaneously through a chapter. So I kind of think everything in a little bit of bigger chunks now. And doing that like that I've been hitting the flow real fast. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Well, that's awesome, man. I know you kind of, not exactly a slump or anything, but with sickness and coming up after the break and everything, took a little bit to kind of get back on top, but it definitely sounds like you found your stride and then some again. So
oh yeah,
nice. So for me, what's the date today? Is today the 3rd?
Yes.
That means I believe it's day 34 of my 100 days of making comics. If you can see that right there, volume 4. So you you do know, so I can count this for my daily or for my catch-up video. It's the art challenge created by artist Kevin Cross. It says every day for 100 days to put at least a half hour towards your comic, and then tell people about it. And so just a quick plug as far as that goes, because there's a whole lot of other people who are involved in on the project that I'm involved in. And if you follow these hashtags here, you can kind of find out what's going on anywhere on social media. V100s with 2 E's, V100s Anthology, and Werewolves and Unicorns. Sorry, my plug's going on a little while. But anyway, with that, I've been penciling page 3, which I have here. I already had, I think, this part done for the most part. Maybe I texted you earlier in the week about it. This panel down here was giving me fits for like 2 or 3 days, man. It was kind of draw and erase. Took photo reference of my wife on the chair pretending that it was like a big monster. Used that, that Japanese pose figure thing. And between all that, I'm starting to get somewhere on that bottom panel that I really like. Which I was starting to have that feeling like maybe I just got to just get it done in there. But I really don't want to do anything on that with this one, since it's not just my project, it's going into an anthology. And all of the other people are much more experienced and have been doing this a while, and I've seen their work going into the book. It's going to be an awesome book. But the theme is werewolves and unicorns and other mythical creatures, so my story is kind of centering around Irish mythology and stuff like that. But
I didn't even really I didn't think about that. I just didn't really even think about that till you made that comment, but it probably does feel like you're kind of like pushing yourself past a point than you ever have in terms of like your expectation, knowing that it's going to be like in a book with other people's. Like it's not just your own project, but this is like you've got like a responsibility to make a good thing with that with a group of people. That's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, it's cool. It's the idea that we talk about a lot, that like surround yourself with people more talented than you.
Yeah.
I've done that with you, and I've done that like around Rao, and then with this group of people in the 100s. And I'm okay with saying that because everywhere, just like you said, it makes you kind of raise the bar of what you're doing. And yeah, this isn't just my name on it, and I don't want to be a weak link in it, because there are no weak links really. Like as I look around at all the other stuff going into it, all these people they're good. They try to like say like it's, and it was like they picked people not based on talent, but on if you completed the challenge and how well you did and everything to make sure you could turn it in. But I think most anybody, once they're kind of putting this much effort into something that takes what the 100 Days challenge takes, then you're bound to be turning out some interesting stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
No way to not get better from that kind of thing either.
Yeah, and I'm trying to like, and it's not hard. That sounds so funny. I was gonna say it's not hard for me to be humble, obviously, by a statement like that. But what I mean is like I have no problem kind of asking for help, which I've already done in the 100s from the editor, Mike Emeritz, and we did a live chat or a Google Hangouts within the group, which was really cool. I got to do one once like a year ago, but this time I asked him for help on a specific part of it, and he said, "Do you mind if I make it public to the group?" And I said, "Sure." And it was a good time, and people really helpful. But yeah, it just seems like a time and place where like this is really the time to stop and ask people like yourself or Mike or anyone in the group, like, how is this looking to you guys? Like, really, tell me what's going on. Anything not making sense? You've been utilizing those screen tones, and I've seen other people using them. And to kind of do something a little different on this 4-page thing, I kind of think I'd like to experiment with those a little bit. But if I'm going to do that, I'm going to consult you, David, and really kind of like, get like some direct advice on where to put the layers and how to set everything up,
Yeah.
I said, I have no problem being humble.
That is a really funny comment. That's like, I always joke that it's like the humble trap. Like if anyone asks you if you're a humble person, if you say yes, then you automatically lose. Like you got to like, it's like a funny thing.
Right. But yeah, that's my progress, I think. And it's feeling good. Feeling like I got most of page 3 penciled now. Kind of getting all the main things penciled as I go through the 4 pages, and then going back, I think, to add some more to like the scenery, because that's not a strength of mine, and I don't want to just like move on too quickly. So, but other than that, feeling pretty good. I'll be moving on to page 4. But with trucking right along, how about problems that you've had this week?
I would say if anything, it's sort of like finished, not perfect is a problem I have of wanting to be perfect and not just finished. And there have been some pages I almost want to revisit or add more to or kind of play with, but and I've had to like resist the temptation. So I guess that's a plus. But there's like this feeling of wanting to like do a little bit more to some pages that I need to just not. They need to be in my rearview mirrors, and I need to be moving on from them, kind of thing. So I'm having a little bit of a struggle just internally of just like making sure I'm okay with certain things, since this is my first real like project that's going to go out into the world, kind of thing. And I don't want to. I want to like know that I want to make sure it's representing me well, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
But there's kind of this feeling too, and I don't want to use it as like a laziness feeling, but the feeling is like I'll do better next time. And I'm having like a struggle of like, is that an okay attitude for me to have right now? And so like that's just a little bit of like a thing I'm having right now.
Ooh, that's an excellent thing that I think a debate that is kind of formed around the whole finished not perfect, which I think could be a whole nother episode. But referencing Mike Emeritz again, he had a quote on his thing that I said, or it said, I think, let me try to get this right. It's not, no, I totally screwed it. It's not done when it's good, or it's not good when it's done. It's done when it's good.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it's obviously that's a hard thing for an artist to kind of figure that line out. And I kind of had reference, which we kind of talked a little bit about, but that being kind of the other side of finished not perfect, because sometimes people use finished not perfect as a crutch to not try their best and move on quicker than they should, which I don't think you generally have a problem with. I think where you're at is probably like a healthy mindset. I just say like you still have your goal for finishing your pages by the time your Kickstarter happens. I think that's totally cool. Then I think it's totally all right as well to, as your Kickstarter gets going, block out like the first 2 weeks of that or something where you're going to allot for your own sort of editing process where you can go through each of your pages with your notes on things that ideally you'd like to do or make better. And then like just kind of start going through one by one, and whatever you can get finished, if you can make it a little better, cool. If not, you've kind of budgeted your time and you move on because it was already sort of good and finished before you did that part. So
perhaps. Yeah, that's actually kind of where I've been putting my brain to, is like maybe I should just finish these things and then I have there's a and that's I guess I could put that in my list of problems, is knowing that the minute I start my Kickstarter, every little detail doesn't need to be done. I still have to wait the whole month, wait the 2 weeks after to get the funds, and then send it off to the printer. But it's like in my head, I want as much as possible to all just be done, and me just like be working like the marketing more or less and that kind of stuff, and not having to worry about like still going through a project and that kind of stuff.
No, that makes good sense too. That's what I'm thinking. Like, just give yourself at least a capper of some point. Like, I'll be finished with the pages by this date, week to edit. Beyond that, marketing.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, I guess I'm done with problems then, because I don't have a problem anymore. I've just solved it.
Bam. There you go. My problem was really that that bottom panel that I was telling you about. It's kind of a.
Oh yeah.
It was just a funny angle. I knew what I was kind of wanting to see. And part of the problem, I think, is my thumbnails I need, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, do the job, but I could use a little bit more like refining on the thumbnails to really kind of plan out a little bit more exact. I get something on there for, okay, I'm going to want to see this action. Cool. It's about this size. It'll take up about this much. But then when it really comes down to it with the actual proportions of the things I'm working with, it can change significantly sometimes. So that was presenting problems for a few days, and that thing can kind of start to get to you as a creator. But last night, real loosely, I kind of finally started to find the shape, and I could see it in those loose lines. It was getting late, so I put it down and then came back this morning. And it was one of those, even I haven't played a lot of video games, but I don't know if you ever experienced this, David, where you stay up really late one night and you're trying to like get past this one part and you just can't get past it. You try over and over and over again and you just can't get past it. You're like, you know what you need to do, but you just can't make your fingers do it. Well, then like you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, you turn it on. The first time you attempt it, it's like, whoop, you go right past it. And you're like, oh, hell, that was so easy. But it was kind of like that. Really started to flow today. So it was a problem, but then you just kind of keep showing up every day and do what you know to do. And it worked out. So that was my problem.
Yeah, that's definitely a good video game analogy right there. That's definitely one.
Not bad for a video game lame guy.
Yeah. For someone who literally does not do anything video game related.
Nope. So a quick plans for this next week, and then we'll jump right into the topic. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you know, don't quote me on this one when we come to next week, but like I do have some pretty big plans. I have about 4 more pages that are at least planned in some way, penciled a little bit, maybe like just at least the panels on the page or something like that. And then the rest of it is all inked and stuff. And then like the entire second chapter is gonna be like good to go for a lack of better terms. And so I would really love, not by next week, by the end, I would say by the end of the next week, just like everything chapter 2 related to at least be on the computer, and I'm just like lettering and stuff. That'll just leave the last chapter, which is another about 10-15 pages that I just need to like just do the same thing with. And every chapter, I mean, just because it's the flow of a comic, has about 5 difficult pages and 5 pretty simple, like, you know, talkie head pages and stuff. So there's a nice, like, what I try to do now is tackle 2 at a time. Like, okay, this one's I'm gonna do a quick layout of my heads and a quick layout of one of my complicated ones, and then kind of like ink them both at the same time. Because I was talking to you about that before. I was kind of just like doing it all in one setting and stuff. So yeah, so plans is to just kind of like push myself towards that goal of within the next 2 weeks, having everything chapter 2 related, just full digital, ready to just be lettered.
I love it. Hefty plans, but I think you can do it now that you've hit your stride again.
Yeah. And
I'm going to directly quote you. I'm going to pull up what you actually said and play it for you next week.
No. Oh, okay. I was like, please don't start playing my voice right now.
Yeah, no sweat, man. Well, awesome. So for my plans for next week, I definitely want to have the last page penciled of my 4-page comic, National or Fantastic Geographic is the name of it. But yeah, I want to have that last page penciled and be starting the inking process. Maybe talk with you next week before we get started, or as we start, or whatnot. Yeah, like kind of piecing it out, and I really want to game plan out the sort of ink layout. So wouldn't mind picking your brain a little bit on that. But beyond the art stuff, because hopefully that's not, I've really kept it simple. That's one of the things I sort of did for my contribution for this, is some of the other people are using it as an opportunity to do something experimental and cool. And they're seasoned veterans, and so like that's cool, and they should be, and it's working out great for them. I probably shouldn't be doing that. I'm thinking a little bit like less is more. Keep it simple, stupid. So there's not a whole bunch left for me to draw. So I want to also get another episode of drawing inspiration put together.
That'd be nice.
My YouTube channel episode thing to kind of help fill your creative bank account. So there is episode of one of that out if you guys would like to check it out, called Drawing Inspiration. But yeah, I've got a bunch of footage for 2 more episodes, and so I'd like to get one episode hopefully entirely put together. When I release it, I like to have a drawing to go with it from it, and just like I show people, like I draw from the video as well. So I kind of get it all put together and then kind of pick the drawing or 2 that I want to do. But I kind of like to have that done as I release it. So I don't know if it'll quite be ready to post next week, but I'd like to have all of the video editing part of it done. So once again, for me, that's a bit of a tall order, but I think I can do it. So I'm going to push myself. But yeah, that's my plans, dude. So yeah, that jumps right into our topic, of which we've been talking about, because that's exactly what David and I are doing right now, is more specifically than just how to make comics. What is David's process? What is my process? When we take an idea, then you thumbnail it, then you pencil it. I think kind of in a nutshell, we'll have to go. I was kind of thinking, David, like start with the basics, like, okay, when you get an idea, what do you do with it? Okay, cool. And then we go back and forth, and cool, thumbnailing. How do you thumbnail? And then go back and forth, and so on and so forth. If you thought that'd be kind of a good way to go.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was thinking. It literally made me think there. Make it tell everybody. I literally heard Tom Haverford go, where do you get your ideas from?
I know. I don't know if it's the caffeine plus being a little bit tired. I just got a triple latte, but it's like I'm in overdrive. I just don't know what to say.
Well, yeah. Yeah. How about, you want me to start or you want you to start?
Yeah. Let me take a couple deep breaths. You get started and then toss it over after. Maybe kind of tell us just the origin of your idea, kind of that sort of phase.
Cool. All right. Well, let's just talk about every artist and their insomnia, right? I get most of my ideas lying awake in bed, wishing I was sleeping because that early I have to wake up for work, but knowing that I'm never going to fall asleep. The other place I get a lot of my ideas is just on the pooper. I get a lot of ideas in the middle of that sort of thing. And then, so what ends up happening is spark of something, I'm just like, I'm chilling and I'm like, oh, hey, you know what? That'd be a really great, like, what if I did this kind of thing as a story? So then what I usually do is I have a little memo on my phone that's like just basically a text to myself, and I will sort of send myself that so I don't forget all the things that I just thought about. And then I take that to my computer and I write down, and I basically just have like this running Word document of ideas of just like things that I might do in the future with my stuff. And then I basically leave it alone. Like once it gets there, there's not much more that I do with it for a good week or two. I might revisit it if it comes back into my brain during that week to see like if it was worth it. A lot of stuff gets deleted because I get back to it every once in a while when I'm typing a new idea and I read the previous and I'm like, why did I write that one? And that's stupid. But I mean, Analog Missions was one of those. I mean, I'd say almost 2 years ago was when the idea first sparked in my brain of just like the world itself and sort of some ideas of characters and stuff. And it's just sat there forever. And then listening to some different podcasts and stuff, and that's definitely a place, like just hearing other people talk gives me a lot of inspiration. Listening to some different podcasts about writing and story writing made me think like, man, the story that I have to write actually follows some really good tropes and things of a good story. And then I don't write a script. I sort of more just like write down bullet points of events in terms of like, I know character A should exist in this world, and this is his world and it's normal, and this is sort of problem that must happen. And then I like think of an ending and I'm like, oh, that's an awesome ending. And then everything in between of my writing process is sort of like, okay, how do I get character A in his world to go through these steps of an interesting story that ends with this awesome resolution that I've been thinking of. I think a lot of my ideas definitely come from an ending. Like I think of the end first, and then it's sort of like, how do I get there? So how about you?
Yeah, similar. Insomnia, pooper, all that basically. Definitely. Yeah, ideas, there's no kind of set place that they come to me, except a pretty consistent area that I'm able to work things out. Whether if I'm like have an assignment like this one where I know I need to do a mythical creature thing, or if my mind's just wandering and it gives me like a brand new idea. Listening to music in the car is definitely where a lot of idea stuff comes up. My kind of opus thing that I've never really talked about much here or at all, I think, comic that I want to do that I sort of started learning all this to do is a music comic that's generated out of all of those just stories that form in my head as I'm listening to music. And I know a lot of people say this, but I really do kind of like a lot of different kinds of music. So yeah, music is something where a lot of ideas come from. And much like David, I have learned over the years that having it in a physical place, whether online, on your phone on a list or, in a notebook, I'm a pencil paper type guy. So I've learned to always have a sketchbook with me. I'm honestly not always great about really stopping and sketching and, being able to take it to dinner and talk to people while I'm sketching. But I still will take it along for opportunities where I can, or at least be able to write down things as they come to me, little ideas as I'm talking to other people, which just discussion with other people about a little idea or a little spark often kind of builds to more. But yeah, the most important first part with that idea, whether you're doing an assigned thing or just out of your own imagination thing, is getting it written down to one degree or another. So that's where it all kind of starts for me. So David, once you kind of have your idea and there's something to do with it, and, you've typed the thing on your phone and everything, like where were you kind of next in your process description?
So usually too, the other half of that is my brain thinks of a cool art piece. So a lot of stories that's like what I think of is like, I want to illustrate this awesome moment or this awesome character that has this cool thing. Like Apollo is the main character, more or less, of Analog Missions, and there's sort of this like, I sort of had this really cool idea of this like strange looking robotic character that like has a mask that's very much like reminiscent of like a human skull kind of thing. So it has like a really weird human quality to it. And I drew that illustration of him like sort of like bowing his head, looking very thoughtful, like at his hand kind of thing. And so there's a little bit of that kind of thing where like the next thing I do is more like illustrate. And it's not like I don't sit down and just like create a character sheet immediately. I'm more like the first time I draw a character, it's usually like in a specific pose or something as like a fun, cool illustration. And then I see if it makes like a really cool illustration, then it's usually like, oh, this character might be worth exploring because that's like, this is really rad. And then, so then I play with that for a little bit. And then if the character works is usually when I go back to like, okay, now I should like maybe think about what this character would look like if he was in my story, which is actually a funny thing because Apollo actually was still pretty new at this process. And I didn't really go back and think of this character at different angles besides the one I had like sort of thought of him as. And I literally just had to mess with that, not even just a couple weeks ago, of realizing like, I've never actually thought about what this character looks like from the front. I've only ever drawn him from like the side views and stuff. So a new part of my process that has evolved from that is that a reason why I'm a little bit not quite as far as I wish I was is I sat back and I made little character sheets of like the different characters that I'll be drawing a lot, because I've always heard that it's a smart thing you should do is sort of build a little sheet of what all your characters look like and will look like, so that you can kind of like pull that out every time you draw them in a scene. And let me tell you, like for anyone who doesn't do that, do it. Because I was super very skeptical about it because I didn't think it would help me. I thought like that's a waste of time. I could have drawn a whole page in that time, but I literally have this little page of the characters, just like their heads and a couple of other random things to help me with angles that I pull out every single time now that I'm drawing pages and stuff and need to refer back to stuff. So I kind of ended up tangenting there a little bit, but I mean, that's kind of what gets it from it's just an idea in my thing to it's an idea that I actually want to turn into a comic, is that like sort of bulleting list and character designs and things like that. And then I'm kind of like ready to get into the meat of it. Over to you.
Well, you got great timing. Now, I was just saying hey to somebody in the chats. Gamer B, thanks for joining us. That's all I was really getting ready to type, so I'll just say it out loud there.
Out loud
there. See, the deep breath, it didn't really help me very much.
Not at all.
But Ronnie in the chat said, in reference to like the music, giving ideas and listening to a lot of different kinds of music, he says, one day 80s rock, the next day show tunes and musicals. I hear you, man. Wherever there's a good tune that inspires you. And then, yeah, Gamer B, haven't seen you here before, so thanks very much for stopping by. If you have any questions or anything, just holler at us. So yeah, next in my process, once I kind of have an idea, I've written it down in the random book, that sketchbook that I'm carrying with me, and now I know this, particular idea I'm going to be doing something with. What I've started doing is then I go out and get myself one of these thin style notebooks, and not a very big one that I can fold up or stuff in my back pocket, really kind of take anywhere, because now this will be my dedicated beater for that comic idea. I can still draw other pictures in it. If I have this with me and I want to draw whatever I want to draw, yeah, of course I can still go in here. But anytime I have any idea through any of those conversations, researching something, listening to a song and finding something like that, it will go in here. And I'll even, like, as I use these, and as you kind of saw on this one, I'll even pencil and light pencil, like the way you like rough draft draw. Like you probably can't even see that, but it's an orange pencil. And I'll do that because then I'll still after seeing another guy who just kind of goes nuts all over sketchbooks and does whatever, I'll just do more sketching and sketchbook stuff right over that. It kind of takes the edge off of feeling like it needs to be perfect. Here, give me just 1 second. I apologize. I've got a rowdy critter in the back.
Apology not accepted.
So anyway, that's kind of my next part, is to kind of get a dedicated thing for that. So not even quite onto the thumbnails, but that will all go in here. I'll really kind of, and not just like, I won't just like make a bunch of boxes going page 1, page 2. Like I'll just start going through and plotting each page on here. And then directly kind of know, okay, I've got 4 pages to deal with. What's going to fill those? And start really getting it. For like you said, sometimes like the idea comes to you in bits and pieces. You get like the ending or the beginning or something smack dab in the middle. Well, I'll try to get like those images down in thumbnails first and then start building around that. How about you? How do you do your thumbnails?
Yeah, so what I do is I lay out sort of like, I get, it's almost like probably roughly what a storyboard might look like. I kind of lay out big squares of like page 1, page 2. And I always think of my stories and my layouts and stuff in terms of like spreads. So what I try to do mostly when I'm laying out my thumbnails is like, okay, what two pages are going to go back to back basically. And then I pull out that sort of bullet point list that I kind of had created, and I almost try to do a thing with that where I like am listing kind of to myself, like, okay, this is bullet point A says I want cool war scene with ships landing, like they're dropping off like D-Day, right? So then I'm like, okay, how many pages do I think I need to like show that cool scene or whatever kind of thing? And then I lay that out. I make a little note underneath it. It's almost like I write a little like title page thing underneath it, like this is that thing or that thought of whatever it was in my brain. And then I do a very rough, like if I showed what my thumbnails look like, it'd be like, that's what turned into that thing, which is that's how I learned like doing sketches and being rough and stuff, is like my thumbnails don't take me any more time than they need to just make sure that the idea is solid somewhere else in the world besides in my brain. And then, yeah, and then it's the same thing. It's just like with my character sheets, which is why I eventually was like, I think I need to do some character sheets. I just like with my character sheet stuff, I basically lay that out in front of me whenever I'm going to start a new page, and until I get the roughs and the references and stuff that I know I want to use for it, it is my reference. And then at some point I get to kind of put that away, and the idea becomes more of a solid thing in front of me, and that's when like all the real cool, good details and meat really starts to happen.
Very cool. Yeah, as you kind of described that, another part of my process was the murder board. Which is you're kind of plotting out the points. Same thing. I got a big dry erase board and I used sticky notes. And this is kind of going into thumbnailing. I guess I kind of jumped to a little bit with the book, and that'll start a little bit after scripting, I guess. And the way I do that is similar to David, where I just will write out point A to point B, what happens. And then like the precursor to that was the murder board, which was I know I want to get from point A to point B, and I know I want to encounter this monster about this way through. I know that I want to see, a cemetery about this play, and start building it that way. And I just had columns in each of these scenes, and it turned into like pages as it went across. And then I just went through and just wrote the story, not eloquently or great or exactly, just sometimes just describing to myself the image that I see, and then just, saying then they hop a fence and the old lady throws something at them or whatever, and just kind of then just once again, like you said, make sure it's in another place and get that written down. And thumbnailing and script writing can kind of go a little bit hand in hand for me, which I'd like for it to be a bit more like I write a solid script and then move on to thumbnailing, which is what my goal is for my next comic with October. But for like what I'm doing now with this 4-page comic, it's kind of like I know the images I want to see, I know what I want to say and where it's going to lay out, and kind of fit it in as it goes a little bit. But yeah. How about next? Like, so you've thumbnailed, we've got scripts. Are we ready to start rough draft and penciling or whatnot?
Yeah, I think so. I wanted to cut in and say, first of all, to Gamer B, yeah, lo-fi stuff is my favorite. When I'm doing any kind of writing stuff where I know I'm not just drawing, that's what I listen to, because the no words and the just awesome beats and stuff is super awesome, just like thinking kind of music. And then I also wanted to say what's up to Abe Sapien, looks like jumped in the chat as well and said hi to us. So what's up, guys? Thanks for joining in here.
And Mr. Squatchy Inc., I hope you're getting some work done. You're still hanging out, but thanks for joining as well.
So yeah. Okay, so where are we at here? We're talking.
So I think we're moving on to pencils. How do you start that? Are you a digital guy? Or are you a on the page guy? Colored pencils, number 2, mechanical. What do you do?
So I actually do almost all of my sketching with a 0.3 pencil, which is like super mega thin pencil lead. And I build my boxes first. So like when I'm ready for a page, I spend a good probably 30 minutes, if not more sometimes, just like really building and planning out really nice boxes in terms of like, the panels and stuff that everything is going to go inside of. Once I get those built, then I do extremely rough, like really quick, almost gestural things to make sure that I'm filling the boxes properly. And I mean, right now I'm just kind of talking about my drawing process. I mean, this is how I go through my process for everything. And then it's like I said, so what I was doing was I would do that. I'd feel good. Then I would just start erasing and fixing and kind of putting in some more permanent things. And I've learned over the years too with my inking that I really don't have to fix a lot. I can leave it pretty rough, honestly, before I start to ink if I really know what I want from a page. And then when I'm inking, it's the same thing. When I'm ready to ink, I start at the boxes and work my way into the pencils. But what I wanted to say is kind of like since I was saying like it was what I did, what I've kind of learned actually is doing that super rough stage where I'm almost not even ready to ink it. I will actually do almost 5 or 6 pages at a time now. I'll just like throw it all out there, like a good chunk of a chapter, because what I ended up finding out is sometimes I'm like, oh, you know what? This page could actually be page 7 and this page could actually be page, and I'm like working things and moving things around and not making them so permanent. It kind of helps me a lot with like sort of the flow of the story and like where I want things to end up and stuff. So that's kind of a nice other little sort of tidbit or comment to make about sort of just general comic making is sometimes you come in, and I think this is why I don't like to script. Like the idea of having the like super set structured script, it makes me almost feel like, well, then if I'm copying things too closely, I'm not maybe giving myself the same amount of freedom to like change it up and realize that maybe my idea from the beginning wasn't the best way for a certain panel and stuff like that. So I find that when I keep things in a rougher structure like that, when it comes time to actually put on the page, I'm more open to like when I see, maybe I'm like popping through for reference to find a specific thing, but I'm like, oh, you know what? Like that angle is way better. What if my page wasn't a bird's eye view and it was this thing, and that kind of thing. So I think
absolutely. That makes good sense. I think what I want to do and like why I want to tighten up the script a little bit more is honestly it's just been quite loose for me at this point when I start out. And for something like this next book where it needs to fit a certain page format, yeah. I don't want to like we've talked about before, the rules help sometimes. Like the limitations can help you figure things out. And that's something that's been really hard for me to get rolling in October is knowing that like, oh, I could make it any size, any shape, any page amount, I can do anything. So like kind of having some of those limitations and then making a script. And I know this will form the page. Even if like something like turns into 2 pages or less, it still gives me a rough idea of a box or so to kind of fit everything into, but no, that makes good sense to still allow yourself freedom. And I think that's the beauty of comics when you're when you're writing and drawing something and coloring it by yourself. You do have that ultimate freedom.
You did actually just make a really good point that, if you don't mind me kind of interrupting, but like that is definitely something that you should do. You should sit down before you even draw page 1, and you should make sure you figured out format. Like we did kind of skip over that, but I mean that is rule number 1. What size are your pages? What size will your pages print at? How long will the thing be? Like what kind of format? I even think, how will I get this printed? Am I gonna print this off myself and staple it together and DIY this? Am I gonna send it to a printer? some printers, like if you want comic size versus like manga size, will only print at certain manga sizes or certain comic sizes. And then you've got to fit things into a template. Like, I mean, yeah, that's honestly step one, because that kind of thing, I hear a lot of people of the first comic they ever made backfiring in their face because they didn't scan their things in at 300 DPI. They didn't make sure that like their stuff would fit inside the template. They didn't have bleeds. They lost some panels. They lost like that stuff that's number one, I guess. If you're talking about like making comics, what should you look out for? Make sure
like my first comic, I think like my page size even changed subtly from, like, because it was like it took so long to do. All of a sudden, I didn't realize that the page dimension was actually just a little bit different.
Yeah.
And, all those things add up. So yeah, excellent point. Figuring out your format in all this before you, which I think you really kind of need that when you're starting your thumbnailing, because that determines your proportions of where everything's going to go. And as far as like page number, I think is good and everything to have an idea and all that. But especially like you really kind of for the thumbnailing process, like, is it going to be a square, rectangle, width, up and down, but yeah.
I even think there's, like, to take it one step further and really beat the bush out of this one. Like, am I going to ink it with a brush? Am I going to ink it with microns? Am I going to color with I think it was Jason Brubaker might have talked about this in one of his podcasts, because I feel like my brain is going to like, I've actually heard people talk about this before, and not just I'm making this up because I'm awesome, but like literally making like a Word document of your rules, like writing those things down and saying like, when I make this next comic, it will be square. It will be with a brush. I will, like it'll be colored. It'll be black and white. Those kind of things are like strict rules that make it so that when you're ready to draw, you're ready to draw, and you're not having to worry about those types of things.
That is a really good point. I do think like once you've made a couple comics and you've like figured that stuff out, yes, absolutely. I think if it's kind of like you're trying to build up to like be making your first comic or whatnot, I think that like if you figure that out a little bit, like figure out your next step ahead of you each time you're kind of moving on. So like, okay, how am I going to pencil this? Am I going to use blue pencil the whole time? Am I going to use blue and red? Am I going to use just regular pencil lead? Okay, I've got that figured out. Begin your penciling. You're figuring out your story as you're doing that. You're learning about inks and different pens and stuff, and you're trying those in your sketchbook. And by the time you get to inking, then you've decided, cool, I'm going to use, traditional brush and some ink wash to do my tones, And then like as you're getting your inks done, you're researching, the printers and stuff like that. I come from a kind of learn by doing method. So instead of kind of figuring it all out at the beginning, especially when you're inexperienced and it all seems like it's so huge anyway, and there really is so many things to consider, it can almost become too big to think about. So I feel like sometimes in your first ones or early ones or whatnot, yes, exactly what David's saying, and writing those rules down and having those, but sometimes kind of breaking it off into chunks, but still always like planning forward, like consistently, like pick a way to do it and then pencil that way, pick a way to ink and then ink that way. Don't decide to experiment partway through. I think, once you make a rule, stick to it, and hopefully those rules you decide are for the best nature of the comic and the best way for you to get it done. But Gamer B also asked a question when you were talking about your pencil lead, asking it if you've ever used a 0.2 millimeter, I suppose, mechanical pencil, David.
So this is actually, I feel like this is like me being who I am, which is like super anal about things. But yes, I have, and it was too thin, which is funny because it's just 0.1 millimeter less than what is just like my favorite thing ever. But yeah, I tried a 0.2 and it just felt just a little bit too thin, and it just wasn't quite my thing. But I love, this is like a thing for me, is like, and I have a 0.7 pencil that I got, like, because I told myself like, oh, you know what, I think my thing will probably be like do my roughs with a skinny pencil, and then I can do like my like tighten it up with this pencil. But like what's ended up happening is just like I just do everything with my tiny little pencil, and I have 2H lead in it, which is like super light. Like I'm never going to do any kind of finished pencil drawing kind of lead in it kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like, yeah, I literally just the other day left my 0.3 at school. only had my 7 and did a couple pages in it and like hated my life. Like the whole time I was like, my lead's so thick and but it was like stupid and whatever.
But I'm proud of you for still like forging ahead. A lot of people be like, I don't have my sword. I can't go to battle. That's it. I'm going back to bed.
Oh yeah, I was desperate. I was like, I need to go to battle. Like if I don't fight this battle, I'll be so far behind. And so I just did, which was actually kind of it felt like a good moment for me to be able to tell myself like, I don't have my tools, but I don't care. I just need to draw.
Heck yeah. So yeah, when I start penciling, something for me is I've always been very heavy-handed, and I tend to draw and erase and draw and erase until I get it right. And sometimes, especially on a panel that gets hard, if you're using regular old number 2 pencil like I was using, or regular colored pencil lead, it turns into a big smudge and just looks gross. So I tried first switching to mechanical pencil, which definitely helped, because as you start to press too hard, it just breaks on you. I think I'm still using a 0.5 or maybe a 0.3, nothing too thin, but it definitely taught me to draw a little bit lighter. But still with that kind of draw and erase thing, the graphite just kind of could muddy up sometimes trying to get stuff just right. So I decided to switch to kind of the blue pencil lead stuff, and I did a comic, the one for Isabel Crane. I did that one entirely in blue pencil. Then I kind of heard about the, I think Jake Parker uses like a vermilion or that and orange or something like that. So that's what you see a lot of my penciling nowadays is done with this. If I'm really wanting to over render once I do this part, for the most part, it starts off pretty messy, and then I keep sharpening my pencil and I tighten it up just with this same colored pencil. For some projects, I don't know for October if I'll then like go in and pencil. It almost seems like unnecessary at this point. I kind of feel like I've gotten enough inking and enough penciling done that I don't think I need that like second penciling step anymore. So anymore, it's really just kind of the colored pencil and then inks or whatnot. But this still gets a little smudgy sometimes, but that orangey color, even better than the blue, works out for me and my heavy-handedness. I've still learned to like not grip my pencil as tight and not push as hard, but still sometimes on certain panels that I have to draw and erase and draw and erase, it works out pretty good for me. So that's what I do. I go through and pencil everything in that.
Yeah, I kind of like that process. I'm a little jealous because I actually have tried that process out early on in my stuff, and it just doesn't work for me to like mess with different colored pencil stuff. Like fun fact about me is I actually am some sort of colorblind. I've never actually really figured out exactly what it is, but I remember when I was in high school, I took the little see the dots to tell me what the numbers are test, and they were like, "Yeah, you're colorblind." I was like, "Oh, really?" And they're like, "Yeah, you didn't know that?" And I was like, "No, thanks for that." But like, it's weird because like I still haven't really found the color that I don't see per se, but I can tell you I've never seen a red firework before. I found that out a couple years ago. But so I found that using the blue pencil, like I thought I was erasing, and my wife would be like, "Why'd you leave so much blue pencil on the paper?" And I was like, "What? I thought I got rid of all of it." Like, so there's obviously something there that's just not working for me with the colored lead.
Gamer B asked a question. Let's see. Is it weird that I like to use good-looking mechanical pencil? No. A lot of people.
100%. Oh, sorry. I was saying 100% no. I am a personal supply nerd. I use a Graph Gear 1000. It's way more expensive than any pencil ever has to be, but man, I freaking love it.
I say if you like the feel of it in your hand and it works for you, it's fine. I've heard people say that it's funny when people fetishize their pencils because they end up getting scanned away or inked over anyway. But if it helps you do what you do and you like it, go for it. And also, where do y'all get colored pencil lead without going on the internet? So me, the actual pencils I'm using are, and I don't have one right here with me. I brought everything else but the pencil. Is the like Prismacolor color erase. So it's an actual pencil that I sharpen and everything. I still have my mechanical pencil, but that just has regular colored lead. And I don't think Hobby Lobby carries colored mechanical lead anymore, but at hobby stores or art stores, you can find red or blue, a lot of times mechanical pencil lead in the drafting areas, because drafting people use that colored stuff a lot, and the non-photo blue and things, and the mechanical pencils. So that's where I would check for that stuff, because I know it's pretty readily available. You can find it, and it's not expensive. So, but yeah. So are we on to inking?
I think we're on to inking.
All right. What I do next is just the line inking stuff. So this is the actual page you can see here that was penciled in blue line, and then I went over it with inks. And I just did the line work, whoops, and the fills and everything. This is a comic where I decided it wasn't going to be colored, but it was going to have gray tones. But on this page, I didn't do any gray tones. I just did the penciling and all the line work. The panels, everything I inked. And what I use to ink, in a nutshell, are a few different assorted microns for the small stuff. I use the Pentel or the color brush. I know it says color brush, but it's not color. It's just black ink. It's actual bristles at the end, not just a felt tip. And it's got a great thin to thick organic line thing. The ink is very black, and it's waterproof, which I like. Dealing with only waterproof ink and markers. I don't like things that smudge. It causes me lots of problems. So the microns, this color brush, and then for bigger fills and what I use for the borders on that, because I want them thick and kind of a little bit wobbly, just by hand, one of these Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen, and it's just the big, this is $1.99. It's just a big fat black one, but once again, it's a nice dark black that is waterproof. And then if I need to do any correcting, I've got my Signo Uniball broad. I don't like to find tips too much, but they do have some different tips. And then also my bleed proof white Dr. P.H. Martin's. I don't know if you can see any of that. This was $11 at the store. But those are all kind of the black and white inking tools that I use right on top of the page, on top of my pencils. When I did this comic, it was like one that I was doing for somebody else, and I was scared to mess up my pencils. So I actually scanned in my pencils every time. Like after I did the page in the blue pencil, I'd scan it in just in case I totally screwed it up. Now I'm to a point where I don't feel that that's necessary. I can light box it or redraw it if I absolutely need to. I don't think that I won't make a significant mistake, but I feel like I can recover quick enough without having to spend the extra time and effort to scan it at that point. But how about you, David?
Yeah, I love that we went into like I just said, I'm a supply nerd. So what you just did there is I'm pretty stoked to kind of share that. So I know I'm not showing these because I'm kind of doing my thing on the screen right now because I didn't get my camera set up. But I use the Copic multi-liner SPs. Those are the ones that are they have a nice metal body and they're refillable. You can buy new tips and new ink for them. I use a 0.5 and a 0.05. So I use basically like the thickest and the thinnest, and not really anything in between, because what I found is that after a couple of years of messing with these, I can kind of feather my lines and kind of actually play with my line weights with them, even though they're just a technical pen. So I can kind of get done when I need to get done with just the two thicknesses. I love these for the same reason that I was just talking with GamerB about, just like loving sort of a really nice, thick, big mechanical pencil. There's weight to these because they're in the metal body. They feel really nice in my hand. They're actually not my favorite tip in terms of technical pens that I've used, but this feeling of the metal pen in my hand is just really hard to like not love. So I use those two. I've had them forever. They're fading a little bit on the like what they tell me that they are, because I've had them for so long, because I just buy new tips and new ink for them whenever I want them. This is a new edition. I don't use it as much, but it's called a Platinum Preppy fountain pen, a 0.05. It's a medium. It is like a fountain kind of pen that is just like a super cheap buy when it messes up kind of thing. But I use that for my weighted lines a little bit, and I also use that color brush you were talking about because I love a good brush pen. But it's kind of, I'm very picky about that nowadays. I do a lot of more just like thin line stuff because when I started doing my screen tone work, which is another thing that I use, which is screen tones. So I have a bone folder to press down my screen tones, and I have two types of razor blades that I use. One is like an X-Acto like clicky pen, like it clicks and has a really thin blade, and then I have like the fancy like deleter actual like razor blade one because it comes with a little cap that I kind of love. And then this one's a super rare one. I don't use it a lot. I cannot remember the name of it. It is a zebra brush pen. It's like one of like it's blue. It's got the blue body and it's refillable. I don't know exactly what like the technical name of it is, but I also kind of, there's just like, I have my deadline pens and then I have my weighted pens to kind of play with back and forth when I feel like I need to add some line weight to get some clarity kind of thing. But yeah, that's pretty, oh, I also can't forget this guy. I don't know how you say this. It's Posca, like Posca. That's my very American way of saying it. It's a Uni Posca. It's a white paint pen, and it's awesome. It's the best white pen I've ever found for putting back in whites. I've messed with jelly rollers and all kinds of other stuff, but this thing is awesome. It's like you gotta shake it kind of paint pen kind of thing, but I love that. That's how I add my whites back if I'm like doing my thin white lines on top of my screen tone work. So yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love all that. Yeah, all the tool stuff. I'm a tool junkie as well. I actually have more tools right now than I need, especially because now that I've made a few things, I've kind of narrowed down on what I use. But it's still fun to experiment for sure. So that's your process on that part, right?
Yeah, and then it's always I ink thin, I erase because it always picks up a little bit of my inks. Then I ink my weighted lines, and then I add my screen tones.
Okay. Very cool. So yeah, I like I said before, I go through and pencil everything in blue and then do all the blue lines, and then do all of the ink lines with traditionally with brush pens and all that sort of good stuff. Then I took this because I don't have a scanner big enough for this. I took it to Kinko's, FedEx Kinko's, and I had them scan it for me. And then I took it into the computer and removed all the blue stuff and made all the blacks darker again and all that fun stuff, which for me, I'm a pretty traditional guy. So what I just described to you was a big process for me. It was fun to learn though, but yeah, so then remove all the blue line. Then I went back to Kinko's, and on my paper, which is, I have my pad right here. The paper I use, and for that it's square, I just cut it down, is this Canson Fanboy comic book art boards. It's not really boards, it's just thick like Bristol paper. It's already got the blue lines on them and everything. For this project, I actually kind of learned the hard way when I did the tones on the next part to print it on the back side where there are no blue lines. But anyway, so this is the paper I used, and I found out that this paper, one at a time, so they have to hand feed it, will go through their machines. So it's a better quality and it's inking quality paper. So I've inked the lines, I've scanned it in, I've removed all the blue pencil. Then I have them print that out at Kinko's, and their inks are waterproof as well. And especially on your black areas, they print out just real nice and even and dark and black and everything. And then, so this was my just black and white page. They printed it out without the blue lines for me. And then right on top of that, I use ink wash. Which I don't know how well this is showing you, but you can tell the different gray tones on his cloak and on the wallpaper in the background and the bed sheet and everything. I add the gray tones, and the way I did that is I got 3 different jars right like this, and I filled them all to the same level. I wrote on top of them the number 100, 20, and 40, which was the amount of ink drops I dropped into each one. So I start off with the same amount of water and then just different ink drops in them. So I know when I refill them how to do it again to get the same tones. And then I use those 3 tones to add depth because I knew it wouldn't be colored. And honestly, at this point, I don't have a great way to color comics because I don't know digital and I'm not quite proficient with by hand means. So anyway, so that's the adding tones. And then once I did that, Yeah. Does that catches me up to where you're at, right, David? You've added your screen
Yep,
tones and done your grays and everything.
pretty
Then at
much.
that point, that's when I start the lettering thing. So do you want to tell me where you're at with your product? Because you kind of mix together you've done screen tones digitally and you've done them manually or traditionally. So how do you do the next part?
Yeah, so
Let's say
screen
you're
tones
like
is,
with your comic, you're just making a gray tones comic. So as far as
yeah.
that goes.
And which is funny because I didn't even think about it, but like Boy and the Bike and some of my other stuff too has just been more like just kind of gray tone stuff. It's actually what sent me in the direction of realizing that what I love is just like really awesome, good detail and gray tone stuff like manga, like screen tone, that kind of stuff has been like my aesthetic lately. And I've been just kind of feeding right into that. But so what I've actually started doing is kind of really fun and I've been loving it as a part of my process is I do just enough screen tone to like love my page traditionally. And then I actually add a bit more gray tone digitally. So I scan the page in, and then I actually add a little extra layer of maybe some shadow or like an effect or something. Like I've been laying in these effects of like texture. I bought this pack of textures that's just like old TV static screens, and I've been doing gray tones over certain parts of the page digitally, and then doing like a clipping mask to put in like that effect of like a blurry like kind of looks like it's like a old staticky TV in certain parts. And so it's been like a fun getting to mix the two. I also have scanned in all of my different screen tones that I use. And so I have them digitally as well. And so I can kind of do a little bit of like realizing I wanted a little more extra detail here and there and kind of take the tones that I've scanned in and like place them and cut them and crop them and kind of like do a little cleanup afterwards as well. So once that's ready, I save that as a JPEG. I scan everything in super high quality TIFF, but then I actually kind of lower the quality into a JPEG at a 300 because that's all it needs for print. And that's when I send that over into Illustrator. And I do all my lettering in Illustrator. And that has been a new process for me. I did all my lettering in my previous comics actually in Photoshop, but I've learned that there's a little bit of noise and some other things about not going vector for your letters. So I've kind of translated myself over into that for the sake of just sort of like feeling more professional with all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Honestly, that's it. And then the comic is good, and I got really lucky, and a friend of mine is really awesome at the like InDesign stuff, and so he's actually been my dude that I just send all my files over to, and he puts it all together into a PDF or gets it ready for print for me. So I actually haven't really learned that process, but I know you have, and I'm kind of actually a little jealous of that.
Ha ha ha. As well you should be. No. So font for me, I've done it a couple different ways, and this next way I'm going to do it a little bit differently even. The very first time I did a comic, it was really I just needed to be able to finish a comic, and that was a very much finished, not perfect thing, and I consciously made that choice to have a finished thing that I could hold and not worry too much about the minutia. With that one, I colored and did all the pages by hand and then put on the computer, and then in the Apple comic making program, I forget what it's called, Comic Shop, Comics, I forget. I just kind of write on top, you put the boxes, you type in the font in the Comic Sans. Everyone's like, oh God, don't use that font that everybody uses. I use that and put a very, very digital font, voice bubbles over my traditional art. And it definitely, there was a disconnect between the two once they were all printed out on the page together. But once again, it served its purpose and it got it done. The second time I did it, I was doing it for the band Isabel Crane and going for a very much traditional old-timey thing, everything done by hand. The first time I did the lettering on it, the project shifted a little bit partway through, so I actually lettered the whole thing twice. The first time I lettered it, I did it completely by hand. So I kind of measured out the boxes because I knew where all the boxes were going to go, and then how the letters were going to fit in there. And I penciled it in there, and then erased, and then would fit it just perfect, and then cut them all out by hand, and was going to paste them on. so that it was really kind of everything on the page. So they're their own layer, just like if you're doing it in Photoshop, but it's right on the page, which I think is kind of the old traditional way of doing it. They would, even if they would draw them in or whatever in the art, they would still kind of voice bubbles, and the text would be like a separate layer on top of the art. So then I would, scan it all in together. When I knew I was going to have to do a significant redo on the font, I decided that I didn't want to hand do it all again for that project. So there was a website, and there's many of them, I'm sure, where you can pay to do many of them yourself or however you want to do it. But it was called calligrapher.com, and it's calligrapher without the E, so just PHR at the end. And for one font, you could do it yourself, and it was like a free thing, and it uploaded into Photoshop. And it was just me writing caps and just my handwriting, trying to make it legible. It gave you an option to do lowercase as well, and I just did all the same letters again, so I'd have a little bit more variance in them, so it didn't look too machine-y. And then just in black, typed that in the on the page, and just typed out all the things, printed them out on that same paper, and then went through and outlined them by hand with marker and pen to like have the outline of the voice things. And my wife and I went through by hand and cut all of those out and pasted them on. That's basically what I'm going to be doing again, but I want to use a better font. And so when on one of my parts, when I have everything on the page to print out to do the washes, at that point, all of the font is going to be on the page, but that's going to be in a very, very, very light blue. And then I'm actually going to take ink and go over it and ink it by hand. So the font will have been put on there with like not my handwriting font and like a nice looking font, but it'll still have my manual hand kind of tracing over all those. So it'll still have that same all the art on one page sort of feel, even though it's like basically 3 different layers of creation and then pasted together and printed off that I kind of Frankenstein together. But ultimately my process, I always end up sort of getting kind of 2 originals out of it. The, completely penciled and line work, and then the ink wash and kind of additional inks and font page. So I don't know exactly how that'll work when I actually start selling pages, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, after that, it's pretty much sending it to the printer, I think.
Man, so I knew that like it's always been our joke that you just like digital's not your thing and that kind of stuff. I don't think I ever realized how much of it you do, like literally like sort of the DIY zine traditional way of just like cutting and pasting and like scanning in, like you literally have like an actual like finished physical piece that has like the words on it and stuff. Like that's kind of cool.
I do like having that because, ultimately, hopefully, especially like with October, I think it'll be a little bit more of interest at that point to maybe sell some original pages. But I've bought a couple original pages from artists. I love seeing that and like that stage of the art, even though a lot of times it is its own finished piece of art, but obviously sometimes it doesn't have the lettering on it. But when it does, I think it's even that much cooler. And yeah, I just, and then it's something like where you can like physically lay out all the pages once you've done them. You can really kind of see what you've accomplished with that, like just bringing these pages in here to talk about it. It's like, wow, yeah, that's, a comic right there. And it's weird, but since I don't know stuff, like I am a fan. I feel like if I knew everything about digital, I would still be the type of person that likes to get my hands dirty with ink and feel paper cuts and all that sort of stuff. But I don't have anything against digital, and I want to learn more and all that I can to help make the process better and easier and smoother. And from what I've seen with all people's processes is even if they're the most traditional person, for the most, coloring things in watercolor and inking by hand and lettering by hand, they're still at some point having to scan that stuff in to at least be able to send it to the printer. So they have to format their stuff. Generally, they're still kind of tweaking their colors a little bit to get things where they want. They're still putting those things in Photoshop to kind of, take parts and manipulate them over other parts and things like that. So even the most traditional person making pages at this point, I feel like you still have to know a little bit of that digital. And even me, even if it's just, scanning something and then reprinting it at Kinko's to then paint on top of again, it's still utilizing part of that and the idea of making traditional. So I have no problem with however you get it done, as long as you get it done.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of cool. I like that. Like, this episode is really cool because we both do it very differently, but we both get it done, and I think that turned out for a really cool little like share. There was like you just heard two completely different ways to get it done, but that's kind of a thing, right? I mean, I definitely remember when I first started doing mine, I thought there was a way to do it, and then the more you do it, the more you realize there's like definitely ways to do it easier, but it doesn't always end up working for you and your flow and your style and stuff. So, you gotta make comics to find that out.
For sure. And like, I came up, in like late 90s, early 2000s and all that. When I was kind of at an age where I thought I was out of comics and things like that too, didn't really know. But just as far as commercial art and illustration and book design and all sorts of stuff, I'm at the age range where, like, for a while there, like, everything was digital and super digital and over the top digital, and people who love comics make fun of that time period for how over the top a lot of the digital art and stuff got, and how much people started just relying on that. So honestly, like, all the computer stuff that I've never had a whole lot, and I've not been a video game kid and stuff like that, like, it really scared me away from art for a while. And then it made me think that, like, well, maybe I'm just like a painter guy. Maybe I should just like paint. And that was fun and everything. But no, it turns out I do like making these stories and making finished illustrations and things like that. So for me to find, to get back into comics and see this like resurgence in the idea of, yeah, so computers are cool, but they really can't do everything. You still have to know how to draw on paper. You still have to be able to know how to do certain things. It gave me a lot of motivation and strength to go, okay, maybe I can still make stuff cool and unique in my own way of doing it, and just kind of problem solve my way around some of the areas where people take it like for granted that, oh, well, you have to use a computer for this part. Go, okay, well, maybe I don't, so.
And that's a really good little point to kind of, I think, close up on, because we're way past our hour. I don't know if you noticed the time. We've been really chatting it up on this one, but there's a very strange sort of, I don't know if you want to call it movement or what you want to call it, of like, people will ask whenever I talk to like new artists and like young artists as a teacher, they're like, are you a traditional artist or are you a digital artist? And it's kind of like, it's the complete wrong question to be asking. If you can't also figure it out without a computer, you need to know how to, like, the stuff that you can do with the computer, you should know a version of that outside of the computer. Like, it has nothing to do with the way your Photoshop tools work. It has to do with foundations of actually knowing how to draw with traditional things, and then you just find those versions digitally. And I think that's a really important thing to say.
Yeah, and even to that point, even just like how we've talked about, the brushes that we use and the types of ink and how we like getting like a nice smooth pencil and everything, the computer is just an extension of that. It's a tool for it. So if you can't take just a regular old number 2 pencil and some loose leaf paper and, make some interesting art, then the best tools in the world aren't going to kind of fix that. You really have to kind of build on a foundation, I guess. So, but yeah. You got any other wrap-up thoughts, Mr. Fleming?
Honestly, besides go follow Art of Mr. Fleming on Instagram and save up your money to buy my comic in March, that's pretty much it.
Very cool. Hey, just a couple things I do want to mention. I have a couple plugs here. One of them, one of our buddies and a frequenter of our channel here, they have a Kickstarter going, and it's been really successful. He's already done a couple successful ones, meaning he's fulfilled. People are happy and they're coming back for more because he's producing quality stuff. And yet again, there's a Magnus the Brave comic #1 that is fully funded. It's reached its first stretch goal. You can still donate at a low level to get a signed copy of the book. And I think this might be something where we're going to start seeing this guy blow up and start getting his stuff going in stores. The success on Kickstarter is pretty cool, and it's meaning that it's a good piece of art that's out there. So I encourage you guys to go support Magnus the Brave. If we don't, I think we have it already kind of in the show notes down there, but we'll make sure that you can find that from Chris Rau Art. That's Chris Rau art. So search that, Magnus the Brave, Kickstarter. You'll find what you need to find. Also, in line with our topic tonight of making comics, whether you're doing it traditional like me, traditional, or digital like David, there's a starter comic making pack that's really awesome out there. It's free. It's from Scott Serkland of Serkworks, Serkworks. If you search that anywhere, I think you'll find him. But we'll have in our show notes, he produced a video here on YouTube that kind of shows all the different tools and what you can do with them. And then all you have to do is sign up for his newsletter. He doesn't spam a whole bunch, but he's a great artist making great stuff. So just for signing up for a newsletter, you get this pack that has hand-done fonts that he's made in it that you can download and put into Photoshop or whatever program you use, digital brushes, character design sheets, thumbnailing sheets, like everything we've talked about tonight. He's got like a really nice way of kind of getting your ideas rolling, getting them down on paper, whether you're printing these things off and doing it like me on paper, or whether you're like David and you're just putting them into Photoshop to use as a guide there to fully digitally do pencils or whatever else. It's not just saying it, like it really is a wildly beneficial thing, and it is quite amazing that it's for free. He's developing a version that won't be free at some point, just because it's going to have so much more stuff to it. But like action lines on it, like David, I know you're going to check it out, but seriously, like you're going to love it, because for me, I'm going to be able to add some action lines to stuff and do my borders, and then like print it off like blue line, and then kind of do those lines by hand, so it'll appear like hand done exact. Oh man, it's going to be great. But it's some, well, I know, man, I'm getting excited, dude. It's some really great tools, but please go check that out. He's a great artist, and he has an amazing product for free for you guys, whether you're just starting or you've been making comics for a while. So those are my plugs. I'm not even going to give you mine because they're down below, so you can check that stuff out. I'd rather be drawing anywhere. David, have you already told us where we can find you? I've been jabbering.
I mean, I kind of made a joke of it, but yeah, Art of Mr. Fleming on Instagram. Check me out, and then Mr. David Fleming on Facebook, and then you can follow all the adventures of analog missions and all of my panels and things I've been posting lately, and also my print works that I'll have. I kind of try to make like one colored cool print a month. The one I'm working on here is the one I'm working on for this month here. It's a little Mario piece that I did. It's got a fun little story behind it of my students, where I'm a high school art teacher, and my students kind of challenged me. Like they did one too, and it was who could draw the best Mario piece, and it kind of blew up and turned into this thing that I'm drawing now. But it's going to make a pretty rad print, I think, when I'm done with it.
I'm loving it, man. Keep us posted on it. Yeah, search us out on Instagram. You'll find stuff throughout the week, but here next Sunday, you'll find us again at this same bat time, same bat channel, about 9 p.m. Central Time. So come join us in the live chat. If you have any questions about anything that you saw tonight, hit us up if you have any questions or ideas on anything that you might want us to talk about in the future, or stuff that you want us to shut up about, you know, whatever. I like to hear it all. Thumbs up, thumbs down, all of that stuff helps. So Magnus the Brave, Serkworks. Please go check those things out. That's all I've got.
All right. Deuces.